Something exciting is happening. Many Jews today feel the need for a revitalized Judaism. People are searching for a more vital and authentic mode of Jewish expression, and more than ever we need to shift not only physically but spiritually out of exile mode. This is Torah Nation TV from Jerusalem, and we are speaking with the head of Machon Shilo, Rabbi David Bar-Hayim. Shalom, Rabbi Bar-Hayim.
Shalom.
There was recently an attempted assassination on the life of Temple Mount activist Rabbi Yehuda Glick. Does the rabbi have any comments in light of this outrageous event?
There is no question that this man is a hero, because for a very long time now, I think it's probably a few years, he has been doing everything in his power, in any human being's power, given the present circumstances, to raise the issue of the exterritorial nature of Har HaBayith, of the Temple Mount, vis-a-vis the Jewish people. The fact that Jews may not visit or pray on Har HaBayith without being harassed or attacked physically and or verbally, a situation, a reality that has existed for some years now. The fact that it is the Muslims who control, who rule Har HaBayith, despite the protestations and the denials of some. It is for this reason that Rabbi Yehuda Glick was targeted by Islamists and shot last week, and miraculously he was not killed on the spot. And we all, of course, pray for his speedy recovery. It is for this reason that he has been for years harassed by the Israeli, not by the Arabs, by the Israeli police. It is for this reason that he has been arrested time and again or detained by the Israeli police, despite explicit court orders to the opposite effect. It is for this reason that despite the fact that the Israeli police knew very well of the death threats against him and the danger to his life, they chose to do nothing about it. They chose, even though the issue was raised with them, they chose not to organize around-the-clock bodyguards and protection for this man. It is for this reason that he was shot last week and nearly killed. And this is all because Rabbi Yehuda Glick and many other people for years have been trying to get through to the minds and the hearts of the Jewish people, and for that matter, the hearts and minds of the rest of the world, and bring to them, convey to them the very simple, straightforward message that Har HaBayith, the Temple Mount, is exactly what it sounds like. It is the mountain on which the temple, the first and second temple, stood, and it is a Jewish holy site, and the Jews have every right to be there. That is the first thing that must be said about this matter.
Benny Rabinowitz, a senior journalist at the Yated Neiman newspaper, which represents the Lithuanian mainstream headed by Rav Aharon Leib Steinman, stated that Rav Yehuda Glick is a sinner and causes many others to sin because of his activities to promote the right of Jews to visit and pray on Har HaBayith. Rabinowitz went on to say that the provocative actions of right-wing activists such as Rav Glick cause Arabs to murder Jews, and that these Jewish activists are to be held responsible for terrorist attacks and their victims. Does the rabbi have any comments?
Indeed I do. These statements by Benny Rabinowitz are completely outrageous. His words are morally vile and ideologically warped, malevolent, scurrilous, and entirely irrational, one might add. They are morally vile because he puts the onus for terrorist attacks against Jews carried out by Muslims at the doorstep of the Jews, of the victims of those terrorist attacks. He went so far as to say that it is the actions of people like Yehuda Glick and other Jewish right-wing activists who are responsible, who cause Arabs to murder Jews, as if we're discussing something like some insentient animal, like a great white shark in the ocean, which sniffs blood and is therefore no longer capable of controlling its actions. This is, by the way, the kind of racist slur, in fact, one could say, that he is making against Arabs. He is treating Arabs, he is speaking of Arabs as if they are animals, as if they are totally bereft of any human quality or moral discernment. He, instead of blaming the Arab terrorists for their actions, he blames the Jewish victims, instead of understanding that it is the Arab world, the Muslim world, which hates Jews, all Jews, wherever they may be, for no particular reason. The fact that we are here and that we breathe air is sufficient reason for them to hate us, and not the fact that this or that person goes to or wants to pray on Har HaBayith. It is ideologically warped to suggest that there is something wrong or reprehensible in Jews wishing to pray on Har HaBayith, or to live and settle in all parts of our homeland. All this is all representative of the Galut inspired ideology and state of mind which informs, unfortunately, the Haredi world. I am aware of the fact that Rabinowitz claimed when he made these comments in a radio interview that he was not speaking in the name of Rav Steinman, and I accept what he says, but it is also true, it must be said, that he is the official spokesman of Rav Steinman. That is one of his jobs, and it is clear that Rav Steinman did not choose a person who does not hold his views, who does not understand his ideology, to be his official spokesman. And from my own knowledge of the Haredi Litai world, I can state without any hesitation, without a doubt, that these are the views of Rav Steinman, and these are the views of the vast majority of the so-called Lithuanian Haredi Jewish world. It's true that some politicians in their political party, the Degel Torah political party in the Knesset, wished to distance themselves from some of his comments, but I have no doubt in my mind that this was only because he, as it were, let the cat out of the bag. In other words, he spoke too honestly and too freely, and they would have rather had him not express all of those thoughts that he was thinking, with which they actually agree. That is my view regarding the moral and ideological aspects of his reprehensible comments.
Is it not true that most Orthodox rabbis would agree with Rabinowitz that it is forbidden for a Jew to set foot on Har HaBayith?
I honestly do not know what a majority of rabbis think on this or many other issues. I don't know how anyone could actually state any such thing with any degree of certainty. It is definitely true that Benny Rabinowitz, this journalist, belongs to a school of thought studied in yeshivot, headed by rabbis who are of the view that it is absolutely forbidden for a Jew to set foot on Har HaBayith. But in fact, what I just said now is also not accurate, because those same Rabbanim would agree, if you ask them, if you push them into a corner, they would have to admit that according to their understanding of the halakha, not only is a Jew forbidden to go on to Har HaBayith, But any human being is not allowed to be present on Har HaBayith in their view of things. And this, in fact, by the way, one might mention, is exactly what is written on an official plaque placed outside the different entrances to Har HaBayith, the Temple Mount, by the chief rabbinate of Israel, which on this issue is heavily influenced by and infiltrated by Haredi thinking and positions. And such signs and plaques have been in place almost immediately after the end of the Six-Day War in Tafshin Kav Zayin 1967, stating that it is forbidden for any person. In Hebrew, the words used are asur l'chol adam. It is forbidden for any human being to enter Har HaBayith because of the holiness of the place. Without any indication, by the way, when, at what time, by what means it might at some point in the future become possible for any human being or certain human beings to enter this place. It is rather strange. I think you would agree that a site is so holy that its only purpose is that no one should ever enter it and do anything there, that it should be simply a part of planet Earth where human beings may not tread and has no other purpose other than being forbidden for entrance. This is a rather strange position. It's not the position of the Torah, but Rabinowitz was claiming that it is asur according to halacha for people, at least for Jews, he was referring to Jews, to enter Har HaBayith. If Rabinowitz and his mentors were serious about halacha, Jewish law, and the sanctity of the site of Har HaBayith, the Temple Mount, then they would not express their horror and outrage at the fact that Jews enter Har HaBayith. They would express their horror and outrage that any human being enters Har HaBayith, because according to Jewish law, no person, Jew or Gentile, may enter certain areas, as we will presently discuss perhaps. Certain parts of Har HaBayith are off limits to all individuals. However, we never hear any word of complaint or censure regarding the fact that the Israeli authorities, since the Six-Day War, have allowed Arabs, Muslims, and all manner of human beings, except for religious Jews, of course, to worship, to play, to make barbecues, to play soccer. Yes, I'm describing real events, things that actually go on Har HaBayith on a daily basis, things that I have witnessed with my own eyes. The way Arab children play soccer on Har HaBayith, the place that they claim is so holy to them, is in fact also a soccer field. It is also a public park where Arab families come and sit down and bring picnics and make barbecues. I have seen this with my own eyes. And the list of outrages is very long. We hear nothing from Rabinowitz and his Haredi mentors regarding this state of affairs. So one, I think, might want to question their true motives.
And regarding the halachic status of Har HaBayith, is the claim of Benny Rabinowitz and his mentors based on authentic halachic sources?
In actual fact, the position of many Rabbanim, not exclusively, but first of all Haredi Rabbanim, regarding entering Har HaBayith according to halacha, is in fact quite wrong and not based on the halachic sources. Now we'll read from the Mishnah in Masechet Kelim. Masechet Kelim, the beginning of Seder Taharoth, the sixth order of the Mishnah, the sixth Seder of the Mishnah. Halacha, the sixth halacha in the first chapter begins, Eser Kedushothen. There are 10 levels of Kedusha, of holiness. Eretz Yisrael mekudeshet mikol ha'arasoth. And it begins by saying that Eretz Yisrael is holier than all other places on planet Earth. And then it goes on to describe additional levels within Eretz Yisrael of ever-increasing levels of holiness. In Halacha Heth, it goes on to say, Har HaBayith, the Temple Mount, mekudash mimeno, is more holy than the level mentioned before. She'en zavim uzavoth nidot v'yoladot nichnasim l'sham. Har HaBayith is the Temple Mount. It's not the Mikdash. It's not the actual temple, the area of the temple. It is the flat mountain top area on which the temple stood. Part of that area is known as Har HaBayith, and other parts are known by other names, which we will read in a moment. And the Mishnah says that Har HaBayith has a special status, and the halachic manifestation of that status is that certain kinds of people, namely Zavim and Zavot, people suffering from certain bodily emissions, and a menstruant woman or a woman who just gave birth may not enter Har HaBayith because until they become tahor, because they are considered tameh, until they become tahor, ritually and spiritually pure, they may not enter Har HaBayith. He goes on to say in the Mishnah, Ahel, there is an area within the general Temple Mount area, further in, much further in, called the Hel, which is a kind of wall, a boundary. And the Mishnah says, Ahel mekudash mimeno is even holier, on a higher level. She'en goyim u'tameh meth nichnasim l'sham. Non-Jews and Jews who have been defiled by contact with the dead, tameh meth, may not enter that area from the Hel on inward. In other words, they may enter Har HaBayith. A person who is contaminated by contact with the dead, what we call in halacha, a person who is tameh meth may enter Har HaBayith, but he may not enter from the point on Har HaBayith known as the Hel. He may not go beyond that point. So here we have explicitly stated in the Mishnah that Har HaBayith is an area which is not off limits to people who are tameh meth, who are defiled by contact with the dead. Then it goes on to speak about even higher levels within the temple precinct. In other words, beyond, further in towards the temple, beyond the Hel. It says, Ezrat Nashim Mikudeshet Mimeno, which is another higher level. And beyond that, there is Ezrat Yisrael, which is Mikudesh, which is the actual temple precinct itself known in Hebrew as Ezrat Yisrael. And there are other levels of people who have suffered a certain form of ritual impurity or defilement may not enter. The list is long, I'm not going to go into all the details. What is important to understand is that Har HaBayith, the Temple Mount, is not all cut from the same cloth. And these statements of the Mishnah were copied and codified and explained by the Rambam in Ilchot Beit HaBechira, Perek Hamishi. He begins by describing, he says, Har HaBayith, which is the area known as Har HaMoriah, is of a certain area. He defines the area. And then he goes on to say that you have the area known as the Sorer, and within that, further in, you have the area known as the Hel, and further in, you have the other areas that we discussed, as we discussed in the Mishnah. This is mentioned in Chod Beit HaBechira, Perek Hamishi. Later, in Hilchot Biyat HaMikdash, Perek Shalishi, the third chapter, Rambam continues, and here he specifies which of those different areas to which he referred in the other halachot that we just read from, which of those areas may not be entered by which type of person. And he writes, Miswat aseh l'shalach kol ha'tameim min HaMikdash. It is a positive commandment of the Torah to distance and to refuse entry to people who are tameh, who are ritually impure, to the area of the Mikdash. And then he goes on to say, in Halakha Daled, this is Perek Gimel, Halakha Daled, tameh meth, a person, a Jew, who is defiled by contact with the dead, which is a very serious level of tum'ah. Afilu hameth asmo, not only a person who was defiled by contact with the dead, even a dead person, a corpse. Mutar likanes lahar HaBayith, may enter Har HaBayith. Shne'emar vayikach Moshe et asmot Yosef imo. It says that Moshe Rabbeinu took from Egypt, when they left Egypt, he took with him the bones of Yosef, our forefather, imo b'mahane lewiyah, and he did so in the central part of the camp, which has the same status as Har HaBayith. There is no other halachic opinion regarding this matter. No one has ever thought otherwise on this particular point of halacha. The Rambam continues in halacha hey, Hahel, which is an area further in on Har HaBayith, but further towards the Mikdash, towards the temple itself, that boundary referred to before called the Hel, Mishalahim mimenu goyim, utmeim eth, uva'ale nidoth, aval tevule yom, nichnas lasham, shekvar taval. From that additional boundary on Har HaBayith called the Hel, from that area onwards, from that point onwards, no non-Jew is allowed to enter. In the time of the Second Temple, we know, in fact, the actual stone on which these words were written in Greek have been recovered, have been excavated, and the words, there is a warning there telling all people that no Gentile may enter beyond this point on Har HaBayith, but up to that point they were allowed to. The halacha states, and again the Rambam says, that from that point known as the Hel, from that point onwards, no non-Jew, nor any Jew contaminated by contact with the dead, a person who is called Tameh Meth, may enter Har HaBayith. And then the Rambam goes on to describe the other areas which are even closer to, or actually part of the actual temple complex, known as the Ezrat Nashim and the Ezrat Yisrael, which are all more increasingly serious in their levels of holiness. The point to understand here, the very important, fundamental, essential point, is that Har HaBayith, the Temple Mount, is not cut from one cloth. It is not one area from a Torah perspective, which has one halachic status. That is entirely spurious. The Mishnah in Masechet Kelim tells us this, and the Rambam repeats this for us, and there are another 100 sources that one could bring to prove this very simple, uncontested point. And no journalist and no rabbi on the face of the earth can change these simple halachic facts. It is entirely 100% true that there are certain areas on Har HaBayith, on the Temple Mount, which may not be accessed, where a Jew may not go. In fact, a non-Jew, for that matter, may also not go. There are areas on Har HaBayith, specifically from the Hel onwards, as we said, where a Tameh Meth may not enter. And that area also is not prohibited by Torah law, but by rabbinic law, that is Midrabanan. The area of the temple itself, the Ezrat Yisrael, that is the area where a person who is a Tameh Meth, who is defiled by contact with the dead, if he enters that area, he is Hayav Kareth. But not the other parts of the Temple Mount, not the parts further out from the temple itself. From that point on, a person is not allowed to enter in that state. But before that point, the Temple Mount itself, there are huge areas where a person, even a person who is a Tameh Meth, who is defiled by contact with the dead, may visit, may walk around, may pray today with certain minimal preparations, such as going to a mikveh, which is required both for men and women. It follows, therefore, that the claims by certain people, such as this journalist Benny Rabinowitz, and certain rabbis, some of whom are his mentors in the Haredi world, and certain other rabbis I might mention, not from the Haredi world, and I am addressing my comments here and my complete rejection of their positions and their statements equally, both towards those Haredi rabbis who take this position, who mislead people and misrepresent the halacha, and other rabbis of a different ideological persuasion who are not Haredi but happen to agree with this position of theirs regarding entering the Temple Mount, also are misleading people. It is absolutely essential that people understand when certain individuals and rabbis claim that it is asur for us to enter the Temple Mount because we are all considered to be Tameh Meth, we all are considered to be defiled by contact with the dead, they are misspeaking. They are not representing what the Torah, what the Halacha states. Often we hear the Magen Avraham and the Mishnah Berurah and Siman Tau Kof Samech Aleph in Bar-Hayim being quoted to the effect that a person who enters Har HaBayith is Hayav Kareth. I invite any person and all people to open up Siman Tau Kov Samech Aleph, to look at the Magen Avraham and look at the Mishnah Berurah and read what it actually says. What they say is that it is asur for any person who is a Tameh Meth, and we are all considered to be Tameh Meth, to enter Makom HaMikdash, and that's entirely correct. As we just said, that from a certain point onwards on Har HaBayith, which is loosely considered to be Makom HaMikdash, the area of the Mikdash itself, the temple precinct itself, those areas may not be entered by a person who is a Tameh Meth, and therefore it is entirely correct to tell people you may not enter those parts of Har HaBayith. But all areas up to that point may be entered by a person who is a Tameh Meth, as we said, with minimal preparation and very simple, straightforward halachic instruction and certain parameters of behavior on Har HaBayith that need to be people need to be informed of. All this is very straightforward, all very simple. It is then very entirely possible for any Jew to visit large areas of Har HaBayith. In fact, people need to know that 5/6 of Har HaBayith, the area of Har HaBayith, may be entered into by a person who is a Tameh Meth, who is defiled by contact with the dead. It's only 1/6 of the total area of Har HaBayith as it stands today, which may not be entered by such a person. So this whole issue is being misrepresented and is therefore being misunderstood by many people, and this is an entirely spurious and invented halachic position. As for the claim that some of them make that, well, seeing that there are parts of Har HaBayith that are definitely forbidden, we may not enter them, and we do not know where those areas are, therefore we are telling people they may not enter any part of Har HaBayith. My comment and my reaction to that is very simple. The reason these rabbis do not know where those areas are is because they've never bothered to find out. Quite simply, exactly what I say. I mean exactly what I say. They have never bothered to check, to learn, to discover what parts of Har HaBayith are definitely only on the level of Har HaBayith, and which areas are possibly or definitely on the level of the status are defined as being part of Makom HaMikdash, which may not be entered. And I would challenge any individual who thinks otherwise to find for me and show to me any written document, any research undertaken by those rabbis who claim it is forbidden for any Jew to enter Har HaBayith under any circumstances. Where is their halachic research? Where and when did they look into this matter, research all the opinions and measure Har HaBayith and find out the actual facts on the ground and debate the issue and come up with a reasoned halachic conclusion? To the best of my knowledge, there is no such documentation. There is no such document because it was never written. None of these rabbis who forbid entrance to Har HaBayith under all circumstances to all Jews have ever actually looked into the matter. They simply have assumed because they wish to assume, because Har HaBayith to them is a headache, not something which they really understand, not something which fits into their view of and understanding of Judaism. It is something that, truth be told, they would rather they could wake up tomorrow morning and find that it simply disappeared during the night and would leave them alone. They have never bothered to look into this matter and reach any kind of well-founded halachic conclusion. And therefore they say all of Har HaBayith is asur. This is not true. Those Rabbanim who have looked into this issue, and many have, very serious Talmidei Chachamim, Torah scholars, have all reached the conclusion that there are huge areas of Har HaBayith that may be entered. It is true, there is room for discussion, and there are different opinions regarding certain areas of Har HaBayith, very specific areas. Some say this area is included in the forbidden area, and some others will say it is not. But if we put those certain areas aside, that leaves a huge expanse of Har HaBayith that may be visited by Jews without any compunction whatever.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, If you would like to obtain Berkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.